Okay. Thank you all for coming. This is week two. Uh, Hopefully, I'm slightly more prepared than last week, but still, my notes are not as extensive as 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 they were in the past, and I think that's just gonna kind of be a necessary evil of the stage of life that I'm in. Um, and hopefully that can be supplemented by the uh, Discord server. Um, and Part of how, so for people that are new this week, um, you guys can, if you guys have questions during, um, for the most part, feel free to ask. But if it if I feel like it's getting too sidetracked, I'm gonna ask um, to kind of post the questions in like the general chat or the Bible questions thing, um, because I really do want to kind of try and keep this to an hour. Um,
Got it.
I have been posting discussion questions in the Bible questions tab, which no one has answered. But you guys are free to post your own questions or interact with those. And those questions, in my mind, are literally me trying to kind of push the text in areas that I don't have firm answers on and things that I'm also kind of like wrestling with. Uh, and I hope to post a discussion question nearly every day, but that's not going to happen. So yeah, uh, please do those. Also in the Bible study tab, you can find links to older videos and things that are generally relevant will be in recommended videos, and things that are relevant specifically to Genesis I'm trying to put into the Genesis tab. Um, I managed to find the diagram that I couldn't find last week, um, which is still going to be relevant to this week. We last week we only got up to day 4. We're going to be finishing off chapter 1 today. And this is right the ancient Hebrew conception of the universe. Um, I have a couple of, and I actually do want to take some time to talk about this graphic just a little bit. Um, and mostly, I want to talk just to point out the things that actually I have an issue with the graphic. Um, and those are basically twofold. One is uh, where it has the waters above the firmament, and then it has the heavens, and there's this edge here. Um, I don't know where basically the belief that that edge comes from. I don't know from the text where you would get the idea that those waters don't extend out basically for all of the known world. Um, Maybe that's the case, but I that's one of the things that I'm not sure where that idea is coming from. And then also, I'm not familiar with the idea that the sun, moon, and the stars are actually inside of the firmament. My understanding was that they were outside of the firmament, but that you could see through the firmament. Um, but in this depiction, the firmament is basically black, uh, with all of those luminaries inside of it. And I'm not sure where that comes from either, but that'll probably be a discussion question that I post tomorrow. So, but let's jump to the text now. Okay. And God said, let the waters swarm with swarms of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the expanse of heavens. And I don't think I mentioned last week, but ESV does expanse for firmament. So expanse, firmament, right there. So God created great sea creatures, every living creature. And oh, and for people that don't know, this is the Step Bible. It's a good website. Um, God created the great sea creatures, every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarm, according to their kinds, every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters and the seas, and let birds multiply on the earth. And there was evening and there was morning, the fifth day. And God said, let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kinds, livestock and creeping things, and beasts of the earth according to their kinds. And it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth according to their kinds, and the livestock according to their kinds, and everything that creeps on the ground according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all of the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in his own image, and in the image of God he created them. Male and female he created them. And God blessed them. And God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. And God said, behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the heavens, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has breath of life, I have given every green plant for food. And it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day. Okay, so we're going to stop there, and we're just going to talk about this section today. Um, so there's a lot of to go over. Um, a couple of quick things that I just want to point out. Um, the word, where is it? The word for creature here, right? Um, uh, is nephesh, and there's a lot of um, debate about this word because you see it's translated as soul, um, and so it says, "Let the earth bring forth living souls." Um, a lot you'll get a lot of different kind of interpretations as to how exactly the word nephesh should be understood. If you look at someone like Hugh Ross, he takes nephesh as kind of a descriptor, and he'll kind of say like soul-ish, and he relates soul-ish to being like human-like or relating to humans. And so for him, whenever it says like let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kinds, he's thinking things like um, domesticated animals, beasts of burden, dogs, cats, uh, things that can like relate to humans. Um, I I kind of have an issue with that because to me it seems like bring forth the living nephesh according to their kinds, and then it lists livestock, creeping things, beasts of the earth. Like yeah, livestock, that those are your animals, beasts of the earth, that's your lions and tigers. But creeping things is like bugs. um, right? At least that's the sort of what I get out of it, and I don't. But that should be a part of the category of Nefesh, I think. Um, so uh, there's that, but the wider context um, of nefesh, I think, is important because it's going to get into kind of what we're going to a little talk about whenever we get to image of man, of what it means to be in the image of God, and like Imago Dei, is uh, like did how did Jews understand the word soul? Because it's like whenever we think of the word soul, we think of soul as um, in, the incorporeal aspect of human nature. Um, and here it's using the word soul uh, to mean uh, living creatures. And in other places, the word soul will be used to mean people. Um, and so you'll have some people that will say, because the word is used this way, this demonstrates that Jews don't really believe in the incorporeal soul. Over the past, I don't know, decade or so, I've seen it a lot where people try to argue that Jews don't believe in incorporeal or a non-physical part of uh, human nature. That's like a Greek idea, and then they'll use the fact that that's a Greek idea to support their belief in um, what's called physicalism, which is basically that human nature is that you just have a body, that you don't have a soul, um, and that then goes into supporting other, um, I guess you classify them as more fringe beliefs, like stuff like soul sleep, or even like an annihilationist view of hell. Although that's not a requirement for an annihilationist view of hell, which I don't want to get sidetracked on that because it's a huge other conversation. Um, but just wanted to kind of point that out. It's not the goal of what I'm talking about here. Um, Also wanted to point out, just fun, um, is where it says great sea creatures. So that's Gadol, Tenin, and like Tenin is literally used for dragon, sea monster. This is the part where when people try to say that there's like a reference in Genesis to Leviathan, this is it. This is what they're talking about. Um, because pretty much every other uh, portion of Scripture that this comes up in, it is kind of in relationship to Leviathan, and this kind of brings us back to what Ryan brought up last week, and so I finally got I got my Logos software to start working again. Um, and actually, the the word that I was trying to remember last week that I couldn't is chaos conf. And so chaos conf is here. Oh, do right there. Chaos conf. I'm not making that up. That's basically the academic term for um, what a lot of, and it's not just Near Eastern. Like it's like chaos conf shows it just means chaos war. I think it's German. There's some German familiar people on this chat. You can correct me if I'm wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure it just means chaos war. Um, but it's basically the idea that oh wow, I don't know what that noise was, but it's basically just the idea that most creation stories have uh, this battle against chaos in order to bring about order. But here, um, God is actually creating that chaotic monster, right? Um, so there's a level here of that this part right here is an example of how Genesis 1 is being used as a polemic against the other surrounding I don't want to use the term pagan cultures, but I guess I'll say pagan cultures. Um, Basically, the other cultures around them at the time, um, because in those cultures they would have seen the need for God to have dis- to fought and destroy these sea creatures in order to make the world. But actually, here God makes them, um, and so that that demonstrates that this process, the thought process, the Hebrew thought process behind creation, is a fundamentally different one from how their neighbors viewed creation, and that's going to come up big whenever we get to that section. The image, God made in His own image, um, which actually, yeah, we're just going to talk about now, because that was actually the main thing that I kind of wanted to discuss. Well, actually, let's before we do that, let's do the "Let us make man." Okay, this little portion right here, uh, "Let us make man." Um, Hotly debated. Um, Pretty much any time you um, start to get into discussions of the Trinity, this comes up because everybody wants to know, what does God mean by us here, right? Um, and uh, the common New Testament answer for that is, well, the name of God used throughout this chapter is Elohim. Elohim is a plural um, word, but it is used with the singular here. Can I prove that? Uh, let me see. Let me see if I can prove that. Uh,
חמישה חומשי תורה, ספר בראשית, פרשת בראשית. בראשית ברא אלוהים את השמיים ואת הארץ, והארץ הייתה תוהו ובוהו, וחושך על פני תהום, ורוח אלוהים.
so if you heard it right there, whenever he said Elohim, he said Ha Elohim. So Ha Elohim is is the Elohim, right? And so he basically, the reason why they know that this doesn't mean gods, because every other time that Elohim is said, Elohim means gods plural. But whenever you say Ha Elohim, that means like the Elohim, and it's a singular reference to uh, the high God, which is Yahweh. This will become more explicit in chapter 2, but we're not there yet. Whenever it'll say ha, it'll say like uh, probably not saying it, but it's like Yahweh Ha Elohim or something like that.
Hey, Kyle,
Yes.
just so you know, at least on my end, I couldn't hear the video. I think it's because it's playing in your headphones and not through the stream. But not important for today, obviously. But just for future reference, I think there's a setting somewhere for that, but it doesn't make sense to mess around with it right now.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. I'm.
Hey, oh, sorry.
Yeah. No. Go ahead.
Kyle, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I listened to a biblical scholar who was dissecting that word, and Elohim, and they added the word like they added ha before it, but it's similar in the word to sheep. Is like you can say that sheep or those sheep, and that gives like the singular or the plural context. And in this particular context, it's singular.
Yes. Yeah. That's essentially what's going on. And that's what I was trying to say is that because it because the word because that I'm not an English major, so I can't remember if it's a definite article or indefinite article, but some kind of definite article. Um, because that's in front of that, that's how they know that it's singular. exactly right. And this is why, like, if you go into like a like, I think it's if you go into like Psalm 82, that's the one that Heiser always like references. Um, it will jump between saying Elohim versus Ha Elohim, and that's how you know. Okay, here he's calling like he's talking to other people that are gods versus God himself is the one speaking, and that's yeah, that's basically how it works. Um, but so because of that, right? Uh, a lot of people think that the us here is referring to the Trinity, right? And so since God is three in one, the us here, let us make man in his image, uh, is a reference to um, the, the the fact that God and his nature is a Trinity. Um, that view has fallen out of fashion with scholarship. I think probably mostly because of Heiser. And Heiser thinks that this is a reference to the divine council. And so that whenever he's saying, let us make man in our image, he's, he, that is he's addressing other members of the divine council. And I really should post some divine council videos in the Discord um, that we can discuss. Uh, but he doesn't but Heiser stresses that he doesn't want people to be confused and think that God had help in making man because down here in 27, whenever it says, so God created man in his own image, it is again, I believe this is the case, it is again Ha Elohim who created man in his own image. It is not all the members of the divine council, it is the singular God that creates man. Those are basically the two competing views for that. Um, and this, especially, this kind of gets us actually a little bit into um, what we kind of discussed this week in the general chat with Ryan, where there is, whenever you're reading the Bible, there is an immediate context of authorial intent whenever you're reading this, and like, okay, what was the author trying to, what idea was the author trying to get across? And I think that that's super important and it's super vital to understand that because you pretty much have to start there before you get to anything else. Um, but I think it's also true that there could be more things involved whenever we're reading the Bible because of the fact that I take this view of God as editor. I think that when God is allowing um, people to write things down, I think God's intention behind the words being written down might be a little bit more than what the authors uh, are. Um, this will become especially relevant. Well, yeah, it's relevant in this part. It's relevant in chapter 3. Yeah, it comes up in a lot of space, a lot of places. Um, and so for me, I think it's fine. Like the older that I get, the more and more I find myself um, not wanting to take a hard line as to saying, oh, yes, it is this, and it doesn't mean the other thing. Uh, I'm okay with, for a lot of things, a both and approach. And this is a section where I'm sort of okay with this being a both and approach. Um, I don't see there being an issue with being like, okay, maybe God partially said, let us make man. Like, maybe he's partially saying to us there because he is a triune God. But maybe the fact that he's saying anything at all, right? He has to be saying it to someone, or I think he would probably be saying it to someone like all of the other statements made. maybe he is saying them to the divine council. Um, I'm okay with a both and approach to something like this. So yeah. Did someone want to say something? I can't see the actual. Um, so okay. So God created man in His own image. Um, so since we were already talking about Heiser, we'll start with Heiser's view. Heiser's view is that it's important to understand uh, the ancient Near East context of what an image is. And I really should have done this beforehand. Um, that, yeah. So like, you know, probably something like that, right? So an image basically was in the ancient world was a statue. Um, and a lot of times it would even be a statue where like the mouth could have been opened, and uh, oftentimes they would uh, perform. I believe they were called. This is where I should have done more research, um, but I believe they were called like opening of the mouth ceremonies, where whenever they were inaugurating a temple, um, and they would put a statue of the god into the temple, they would do some kind of ceremony where they would essentially like invite the god to inhabit the statue, and uh, there was usually some process where the god would be like breathed into the statue and to like give the statue life and like animate the statue. Um, and Heiser's view is that basically what's happening is uh, we haven't talked about it much, but there's a whole bunch of analysis out there about how the 6 days of creation are akin to the creation of a divine temple. And actually, if you look at under recommended videos, all of this stuff here from Inspiring Philosophy, he goes into that a lot more about the divine temple view of Genesis 1. And so I didn't want to harp on that because you can just watch his much better videos. Um, but the idea is that in God making his own cosmic temple, he wants human beings to be his image, and so Heiser would often use the word imagers, and so he'll say that God made man to be his imagers, um, and then he'll often uh, couple that with, I believe it's the second commandment, which is like, do not take the Lord's name in vain, and that the proper translation of that is something closer to do not bear the Lord's name in vain. And by bear, it means to like carry, right? And like as in it is a burden, like you're carrying the name of the Lord. And so carrying the name is basically the same as being like God's image. And so if you're going to be one of God's imagers, don't do that action in vain. Which again, this is one of those areas where I think there's a lot of truth in the um, applicability of that notion. Um, and I'm also perfectly fine with the idea that this is also serving polemical nature, because basically it's saying, hey, all of these other gods in the surrounding cultures who needed to fight wars to do all that stuff, and then they have um, these vanity statues that act as their own image. Well, our God creates order and peace and has everything under control. And actually, we, mankind, is um, we serve as his imagers, or as his images, and that's why we don't have an image of God in our temple. Like there are no images of God in the temple, right? Um, that whole idea, I'm perfectly fine with. Um, but I think that this is one of the areas that I think that this also think that there's more going on here. Um, uh, I also wanted to, so I think for most people, whenever they try to um, figure out what does it mean for us to be made in the image of God, most people are going to take a stance that's something like William Lane Craig's view, and it means something like um, our cognitive abilities, uh, the fact that we have a conscience, the fact that we can um, contemplate things, we are aware of our own mortality. All of these sorts of things um, usually get lumped into what it means to be made in the image of God. Um, if you look into like Hugh Ross and Reasons to Believe, uh, they'll make it something even more basic than that. They'll say it's something like uh, being able to do like pattern recognition, language, to be able to do symbolic interpretations. There's a lot of times where people want to say that like the image of God refers to some sort of capacity. Um, I tend to not agree with that. Um, because, well, for one thing, whatever capacity you think is being applied here, um, all of the beasts of the field probably have some sort of capacity that's similar, but is less than that. I think that there needs to be something unique about the image that's happening here. Uh, and I also think um, I also think that in some ways that image does need to reflect back onto God, because it's God's image. It's not just something that makes us special from animals. Like I think it needs to make us special from animals, and I think it needs to reflect God. And if I think if you just pick kind of an arbitrary human ability, um, to me that's not specific enough, because God kind of has all abilities, right? So like, it's not that it doesn't really say something about God. Um, and so
Would
yeah, so
sorry, I just was thinking out loud. Would speech maybe fall into it? Because this is all God said, God said, God said, God said,
yeah, so
and then
that's
we
what I said.
have the ability
Yeah, that's
to
what I said
speak.
earlier by like language, right? So like a lot of people,
Yeah.
like William Lane Craig would put like language in there. And this
Mhm.
is, by the way, this is also part of why I linked William Lane Craig's book in there. He talks about this a lot. Um,
Mhm.
and so like yeah, if you take that image to be like a capacity thing, it could be language. But for me, like I said, I take it as, I think it's trying to say something about just what we are, what human beings are, and like on an ontological level. And so I, and this is where we're going to get into. I do I do not think that what I'm about to say applies to the original authors. I don't think that. I am I am reading the Trinity back into this uh, in order to say that part of what's being said here is that I think God is making man um, in a similar ontological way to him. And what I mean by that is we follow a triune God. And so I think that human nature has a tripartite um, distinctions. And basically, I am not going to go into this because it would take us too long. I'm not going to go into it here, but I, it'll probably be a thing that I might write something up on. But basically, I think that human nature is comprised of body, soul, and spirit. And I think that soul and spirit are actually two distinct but connected things in the same way that I think body, your physical part, and your soul, your immaterial part, are also connected things. And I think that that is part of what is going on here with the R image. Um, yeah, go ahead.
Um, I'll make it quick. No, that was super observant, Ryan. I've heard some people make kind of like you're arguing, Kyle, and that is like, for example, if you have somebody who is cognitively impaired, does he no longer bear the image of God? Or somebody who is mute, do they not bear the image of God? And so there's a little bit of problems when you go to like actual physical attributes, and that it seems like there's a limitation to that because it causes problems. So then you're saying someone who, you know, uh, doesn't have all the cognitive ability or ability to whatever, you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
It seems like it leads to issues.
I think it also leads to issues into kind of what I was saying before of like, okay, so if we want to say it's speech, right? Like, uh, yes, our speech is fundamentally different, but like, there's a way in which dogs speak. There's a way in which dolphins speak. Depending upon whether or not you believe all of the sign language apes, um, they have a way of speaking. And even if they're not speaking in the exact same way that we are, there is a certain level of capacity there. And so, it, if if you mind, and this, like to your point, Andrew, like it brings us into a thing of like, if we think that the image that God's making is has something to do with capacity, um, you you end up drawing more and more. I see people end up, and I see this a lot with I, like this is one of the areas where I kind of disagree with William Lane Craig. I really like William Lane Craig, and actually I also disagree with Reasons to Believe on this. If you think it's something to do with capacity, as soon as you draw that line down, you can kind of think of an example that goes one way or the other on that line. Um, and so, like, I know Reasons to Believe, I think for a long time, said that it had something to do with like tool use. Well, then research came out that basically showed that like orangutans could use tools and like ravens could use tools. And so then they were like, okay, well, it can't be tool use. And they changed it to something else. And I do have a certain amount of issues with that approach. Um, and like and I don't, and this becomes one of the things where it's like, okay, I don't want like, all right, all right, so uh maybe in the future, right? Um maybe in the future Elon Musk's Neuralink gets good enough to start interpreting, like, or somewhat translating dogs barks into human language, right? Like, uh are we going to start saying that, like, they can speak, like? And I mean, they even have those things now where it's like they have, um oh my gosh, I mean, what were those buttons that like mom wanted to get for Dobby or whatever, that like have like recorded sayings? There's like these things where like they have like little recorded sayings, and then like they can like teach the dogs like the words, to like for whenever they want to say, and the dogs will go and like press the little buttons, and then the dogs like start to like string words together to kind of form new ideas or even sentences and everything. It's like, is that what they're doing? Maybe, like, I don't know. And so, uh, that that's sort of my issue with it.
Hey, hey Kyle,
Yeah,
could
go
I
ahead.
add something to that?
Yeah,
So, I feel like everybody's probably listened to a bunch of Charlie Kirk after he passed away.
sure.
I didn't listen to him a whole lot before that, but I listened to him a bunch after he was assassinated. And one of the main points that he always made was, and it's such a simple question, honestly, but it does get to the heart of the issue, which is, but when does life begin?
Right.
And if ability is somehow, or the degree of your ability defines how much you are in the image of God, then as Christians, we completely lose any ability to say that abortion is wrong, because it's the attachment of the image of God to us that makes us even worthwhile as in the moment of conception.
Yeah, the value of
If you're
human life. Yeah, versus
the
versus damage.
value of human life is, yeah, it's completely defined by the fact that we're image bearers.
Right.
As soon as you erase that, then yeah, kill the clump of cells. Who cares?
Well,
But
and
so it has to be something inherent, something beyond or transcendent beyond abilities. Sorry, go ahead.
well,
That's all I want to say.
and to bring it back into the text, right? It it do if you can, conceive of a human that doesn't have the image, it means then that they also don't have all of this, which is they don't have dominion over, right? They're no longer in, um, the same class, and have, um, like, they don't have these blessings, right? And so if they don't have dominion over the fish and the birds and the creatures, well then, and they are a creature, then that means that they're in this category of over every living thing, right? That moves on the earth, right? They become just one of the other every living things, right? And so having the image of God is the thing that puts you in a class that is above every other living thing, right? And so, yeah, I think that's generally right. Um, okay, we have 15 minutes. Um, this is going to come up more whenever we get to chapter 2 next week, but I just want to, uh, make it clear here. Um, the word man is Adam, right? And so, uh, but Adam is also the Hebrew word for mankind. So there's a debate here about when he says, "Let us make man," and whenever so God created Adam, is he creating a single human male, or is he creating all of humanity? Um, I'm just gonna leave that up in the air, except for to say I yeah, I guess I'll just say it. It doesn't matter. My view is that in this chapter, God is making humanity, and that in chapter 2, uh, you'll see a transition point, and I believe that God makes an individual. I think that God then makes an individual human named Adam, named Adam. The last kind of section that I wanted to, uh, uh, oh man, yeah, no, I didn't get to everything. Okay, well, we'll try to run. I'll try and run through it quicker. This part right here. God said, "Behold, I have given you every plant, um, yielding seed that's on the face of the earth, every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food." Um, and very specifically right here, and I have given every green plant for food. Um, it is a common belief, both in young Earth creationism and actually outside of it. You don't have to necessarily believe in young Earth creationism to have this view, but a lot of people have the view that because of this verse, what this verse is saying is basically that all of the creatures at this time period, all the creatures, and including humans, every creature was a vegetarian. Um, I have given, and basically saying that they were only eating plants. Um, this is usually coupled with uh, a verse I believe it's in chapter 7. I have to go back and check, but after Noah, where then God seemingly seems to make it okay for humans to eat meat. Um, and I think even reasons to believe take uh, who are not young Earth creationists, they're old Earth creationists. They also take the stance that human beings were vegetarians prior to Genesis 7 or 8. I wish I had written that reference down. Personally, I don't really think that's uh, what's going on here. Um, Part of that understanding comes from uh, a a mistranslation in the King James. In the King James Bible, the word food here is translated as meat, and so uh, whenever it says like I've given you every green plant for meat, it seems like, oh, God's giving them plants as a substitution for meat, and that then makes sense of why you would think that it's um, that everybody's being a vegetarian. But I think that this is just I think that this is I think there's a couple things going on here. One, I think it's a uh, poetic way of recapping and connecting the previous days, right? Because it then connects, because this up here, this day is whenever the seeds and the plants come about. It connects it to the other days. It it helps form that like chiastic structure. It's a like it is the blessing to man, and goes back to, and it goes like back through the creation. um and I think that that's just trying to show that like the start is with the plants, and that it goes from there. um Part of uh if you watch that Inspiring Philosophy video, he addresses this as well. And this is a point that I do sort of agree with him on, even though there's a lot of points in that video that I disagree with him on. about that, where it says, "Fill the earth and subdue it." Um, see how it says it's like with force, bring into bondage, and dominion is like to tread down. Um, this dominion, which by the way, this dominion word for dominion right here is not the same as the word for rule up here. They're a different thing. That's one of the things I was referencing in the discussion question. But this dominion is, I think, an implied, like tyrannical, like violent, like you're allowed to basically exhibit, um, like a level of authority and control over these creatures, uh, to, and I think the only reason you would do that is to eat them. Um, I don't think you're allowed to just. I don't think you're allowed to just, you know, cause harm to animals for no reason, right? I think if you take the view that, oh no, they weren't allowed to just do that until later, it's like, okay, well then what were they doing to the animals and the creatures prior to that? Um, it I don't think it makes sense of the term, dominion, to be like, oh, I think the only valid kind of use of that dominion there is to say that you're basically cultivating these creatures for food, right? Um, which then basically means that this whole saying here of like you shall have them for food, like it it goes to everything. Um, the last, yeah, okay, I'm gonna say two things really quickly. Um, uh, we didn't talk much about what it means to be good, but this kind of comes into view here about the food and the animals, because a lot of the arguments that people make is, okay, well, you can't have you can't have people eating animals prior to this because there was no death. And since there was no death, you can't have that, and there can't be death because death is imperfect. We'll talk about this more whenever we actually get to the fall. Um, but I just want to point out that I don't think good means perfect. Um, it doesn't mean that in English, and even over here, I don't think it means that in Hebrew either. Um, and in fact, I really don't even know what it would mean for uh, like an actual world to be perfect. Um, it then brings into like question of like, okay, well, are you if you're eating plants, are you causing harm to the plants, right? Um, and this gets into even that like Imago Dei thing of like, okay, well, depending upon what we classify that and start applying it to animals, well, you can start applying it to plants, right? I can find enough scientific studies out there that try and say that plants can detect pain and all that stuff. Um, and so I don't think that that is, I don't think, I think that the idea that Eden was perfect is actually, I, we don't have time to go into it here, but I think it actually causes a lot of problems with your theology going forward. Um, and actually, a good, a good video for this will be the one that Evan linked. where it says, "Did God want Adam and Eve to eat the fruit?" Um, I think that actually comes into this question of does good mean perfect? And the last kind of really quick thing that I also wanted to say um, is uh, where did I put it? Yeah. Okay. Really quickly, these two pictures are from Inspiring Philosophies video about Genesis 1, which I encourage you to go watch. Um, this is the diagram kind of explaining that framing um, view that I talked about last week. Um, but I just wanted to bring up this image because um, I, I wanted to relate it back to the conversation that we had in the chat about like trying to understand the original language versus concordism views. And part of the reason why I want to still talk about and discuss concordism views, part of that is because I think we actually can't fundamentally get away from them. And the reason why I have this image up is because this image is from Inspiring Philosophy's video where he's talking about John Walton's view, right? And John Walton is trying to explain like an ancient Hebrew view, like give context to the ancient Hebrew view, and he is he's like John Walton is deliberately trying to not engage in concordism. But in Inspiring Philosophy's video, basically defending John Walton's view, he posts this, which this image where he's trying to basically explain, if you don't know, this is an image that's supposed to be displaying the history of the Earth, right? So time and the Big Bang start back here, and then as you go forward, um, he labeled this Creation Week, but actually this is supposed to be like the present time. Um, this image in and of itself is a form of concordism, right? He's taking an image that is a scientific understanding, and then he's mapping on these ideas from the Bible to the image. And so I just show that to say that in some level, I don't think, like, at the same time I want to critique hard concordism, but also I don't think we can fully get away from it. And I just I think that's important, especially as we get into the rest of the early chapters of Genesis, because we're gonna start to run into, okay, not just history of the earth and the universe, but history of people and people groups, and uh, that we're going to have to wrestle with how we think about these different people groups. But that is all I have for this week.